This is your host, Jason Snellgrove, and I will be your guide as we journey down the road to pleasure hunt or hitting the long trail to those great comp hunts. This is the Coonhound Collective
Guy hunting with me said, "What the blink is that?" He was loud and impressive. When he treed off by himself, he's probably a quarter mile from the other dogs, and he was just one of a kind dog, really, and people kind of realized what he was.
That voice that you hear there is Mr. Jess Dikerson, if you haven't already picked up on it. And that dog that he's talking about is the one and only Nocturnal Nailor. We're going to lightly touch on some subjects today as me and Mr. Jess caught up in passing when he was coming through Springfield, Missouri. This is just part of what we're going to get into with him. We're going to get set up to do a little bit longer episode with him in the future. He was kind of in a hurry and we was pressed for time, but we was able to get together and get this done. I really hope you enjoy it. Sit back and enjoy Mr. Jess Dikerson. Hey guys, this is Jason over at the Coonhound Collective podcast. If you're thinking about swapping to a different dog feed, give my friends a look over at extremedogfuel.com. They carry two different lines. They carry an elite and a professional. The professional has corn, wheat, and soy in it. The elite does not have corn, wheat, and soy. Go over to extremedogfuel.com, see which line and which mixture is right for you. Find a retailer near you. If you're in the southwest Missouri, northwest Arkansas area, you can't find a retailer and you want to give it a shot, hit me up at thecoonhoundcollective@gmail.com. I am a current dealer for Extreme Dog Fuel. I can get you pricing, I can get you dog feed. Again, go see my friends over at extremedogfuel.com. You won't be disappointed. Alright, thank you today for joining us on the Coonhound Collective podcast. Today I'm joined by Mr. Jess Dikerson, and we are doing this live and in person, and I want to take a minute to thank my son for allowing me to use his house here in Springfield. Mr. Jess, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Jason.
Well, I really appreciate you taking your time to be here with us today and share part of your story with us. Won't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and stuff like that?
Well, Jason, I'm from a little old town called Mulberry, Kansas, in southeast Kansas. It's right outside of Pittsburgh, and I was raised there. Started coon hunting with some local friends of mine. One of the boys' dad hunted his whole life, and I started hunting with him when I was just probably 6, 7 years old, and just fell in love with it and been doing it ever since.
Okay, so as you started coon hunting with them, when did you really get into your own dogs, and how did that story come about to get into your own hounds and start competition hunting?
Well, it wasn't long after I hunted with those guys when I liked it that well. I ended up getting some dogs, but the first few dogs that I had, a lot of them wouldn't tree, and they just run all night. And we was from a poor family, and I remember lots of nights taking the dogs out, not even have batteries for my flashlight, so I'd just walk around through the dark. I could walk from my house, the little town I lived in had woods all around it. I would just walk around. I didn't have to worry about them making a tree because they never treed much. Mm-hmm. So that's how bad I wanted to hunt. Now I got to have the right dog, the right light, and the night's got to be the right night to even go.
Yeah, well, I definitely understand that. You just, when it gets in you want to go no matter what, for sure. So, what hounds did you start with? What kind of hounds? Has it always been Walker dogs?
No, I hunted different breeds and stuff. I've hunted about every breed there was, but when I started, got about 15, I started entering a few of the little local grade hunts, and that kind of gets you hooked in competition. And, we was getting beat quite a bit when I was hunting some of that stuff. So about everything was beating me was walkers. And so I'm thinking that if you can't beat them, you might as well start hunting them. And that's how I started hunting walkers when I got a little older. And that's really about how it progressed.
Okay. So you started getting into the Walker dogs, and what was the first dog that you really had that really you could see that, okay, I'm going to have something here that I can win with and compete with at a big level?
Well, the first dog that I had that was a pretty nice dog, and they all got holes in them. But I had a dog, I called him Dickerson's Rolling Thunder. He was a dual grand, made him a dual grand. And he was probably my first dog that really really showed me how to win. And from there, I just kept progressing, getting different dogs, and finally got the line of dogs that I like hunted the most, and just kind of started staying with them.
Okay, well let's move into that. What is that line of dogs that suits you the best, that you like hunting, that some of your stuff has come from now?
Well, of course, a lot of people know about Nailor, and I bred a female, called her Lockdown Lassie. That was Nailor's mother, and I took her to I think Larry Schultz was in Harris, Minnesota when I bred Lassie. So I took her up there, and a friend of mine, Tom Edwards, and I went up there, and we both had a female to breed. We bred them both, and so from that mating come Nailor and several of his litter mates.
Okay, so out of that litter come Nailor. I've seen pictures of the dog, and he looks like what a coon dog's supposed to look like. Big blocky head and stuff. What tell us about Nailor and how he progressed, and some of the things he won, and some of the things about him.
Well, when I first got Nailor, he was a pup. I raised him, and he was about 10 months old when I started hunting him. And first couple of nights, he was always gone with the dogs. But the third night we hunted him, he got treed away from the other dogs, treed by himself. First time he ever treed at night. And guy hunting with me said, "What the blink is that?" He was loud and impressive. When he treed off by himself, he's probably a quarter mile from the other dogs, and he was just one of a kind dog, really, and people kind of realized what he was. He was loud, good looking dog, and just about everything most people wanted to breed to in a dog. So I guess that's how he caught on.
So his reproducing ability, I mean, obviously, I know from southeast Alabama, where I'm originally from, if you said Jess Dikerson, automatically Nailor was the name that went with it. So everybody knew, this dog. What are some of the things that he won and events he won, and some of the things that you liked about him especially?
Well, I took him to a lot of the local hunts, and I didn't hunt him in any hunts till he was about 19 months old, and granded him out. He was 21 months old when I granded him, and he just won about everything I put him in. Nailor was his style. Nailor was a kind of dog that was a winding type dog. He treated layup coons, best I ever seen at it, and he would strike. If you were striking good tracks, he would strike as quick as any of them. On a medium track, he was more of a medium type strike dog, and on a bad track, he was a low wind strike dog. But a lot of times most of the time he'd be ahead of the dogs and just open here and there, and then he was treed.
Okay, so going forward from Nailor, I know you've had some dogs out of him. They go back to him. Where did you kind of progress to? While you had Nailor and while going forward.
Well, I hunted several dogs off of Nailor. We've had several nice dogs out of Nailor. We had a female we called Tipper that was one that I liked pretty good. She was wild and a real strike dog, and through the country, and hard to catch until she was treed. You had to go get her off a tree, and sometimes it could be a quarter mile, sometimes it'd be 10 miles. She didn't come back, and if you took her on a bad night, she was going to be treed somewhere. From Mabel, after Tipper, we had a female at the same time. We called her High Dollar Lady. She was off of Nailor, and a leopard bred female, and she was a nice dog. The Tipper female I granded out that we was talking about a while ago, and she was a gold champion in PKC. And the lady female, we granded her, and then she was a gold. We made her a gold champion also in PKC. And then from there, we had a dog called Skipper that was off of Nailor. Him and Tipper were litter mates. And I sold Skipper to Jeremy Michaelis, but he was a really nice dog and a really reproducing dog with a big mouth.
Okay, so the Nailor, he went back to Tar Rattler, is that correct?
Yeah, he was out of Tar Rattler.
The Tar Rattler dogs and stuff like that. So as you progress with these dogs that were produced out of Nailor, did you always hunt them all in PKC and UKC? Or did you prefer to hunt one over the other, or did it matter to you?
No, really, I didn't prefer hunting one over the other. It's just, when you take one, you grand him out, then, you go to some PKC hunts and you just hunt them. And if you got more than one dog, you sometimes, everybody thinks they have a favorite dog at times, and you do once in a while have one that you favor over the others. But these dogs were all pretty balanced dogs, and and I could just reach in the pen and get one out.
Yeah, it's nice when you can go up to the kennel and just don't know which one to pick. Just grab one, you know you can take it and win with it for sure. That's real nice. Makes it real convenient for sure. So moving forward from those dogs, you had a dog named X Junior. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about him, what he's won, and what you liked about him, what characteristics you see that is carried through with him.
Before we go that far, maybe we should back up to Nailor again and tell you. Mostly hunted Nailor in most of the local hunts. I did put him in some AKC hunts, and he was an AKC night champion also. But Nailor, when we was hunting him one night, pleasure hunting, it was a dark, rainy night, and we got him hit by a car, and I thought right then that he wasn't going to make it, but he lived through that, and that pretty much retired him from the big hunts, or for me taking him to the big hunts. When he got healed up from that car hitting him, people were breeding to him so much I couldn't even hardly get him out and hunt him like I'd like to again. But up to that point, he was about 30 months old then. Up to that point, I hunted him about every night.
So you were live covering the females that were breeding to him. Did you ever collect him at all?
Yeah, we did collect Nailor, and we still got some semen, which I see people on some of the boards, message boards, saying Jess doesn't have any semen off Nailor, and I've never told anybody I don't have any. We did lose some semen at one area. One of the clinics up there lost some semen for me, but we still do have some. But as of now, I'm not going to sell any of it.
Okay, yeah, that definitely makes sense. So is there anything else we need to cover in that Nailor era that you'd like to cover while we're here and before we move on?
No, I'll probably... After I leave here, Jason, I'll probably have a lot of things that I think of after so.
Well, that's always the case. I leave somewhere and I'm thinking, dog, I should have asked this.
Yeah.
But
I enjoyed hunting a Nailor. He was probably the loudest hound I've ever heard in my life, treed. It was hard for me to leave him home and start hunting something else when he was so young still. But, we were, at the time, by the time Nailor was healed up from that wreck, he was breeding 100 and some females a year, so then it was hard to get him out and hunt him like I wanted to.
Yeah, that makes it tough when people are breeding dogs like that, and you want to get your dog out and hunt him, but he's more valuable in the stud pen than he is out in the woods at some point, for sure. Okay, well, let's just go ahead and go on forward here, and bring us all the way up to X Junior and any stories in between that you want to share.
Okay. Well, I want to touch base with, we bought Skipper from a guy in Arkansas. His name was Brad Honeycutt, and so I started hunting Skipper a lot, and a guy in Illinois raised Skipper and Tipper out of a female they called Freckles, and a guy named Larry Weiss had her, and he'd bred her to Nailor once to get the cross with Skipper and Tipper. He come back to breed a second time, and we never could get her bred. So I bought her and from Larry, and along with her come Tipper. Tipper was like 11 months old, and he said, I'm going to quit. So if you want this older female, you got to buy this pup. I really didn't want the pup, but then after I had her, I liked her better than the mother after I got to hunting her. But that's where Skipper and Tipper came from, that cross, and then we've used that right on down to X Junior. He come from that cross out of X Junior and a second junior female.
Okay, so
and I said he come out of Skipper and an X Junior female.
Right. Okay. Oh, out of Skipper.
He was out of Skipper, and I think I don't know if I said something there. If you can go back and see that or edit it later, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I will. I'll make a note for it.
Because X Junior was out of Skipper, and I think I said X Junior.
Okay.
But
okay. So with X Junior, you won the world championship with him, right? Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
Won't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about X Junior, what you liked about him?
I'll tell you how I got him.
And tell you how you got him, how the whole process come about, and lead us all the way into the world championship.
Okay. I was how I come up to get X Junior. I had a long life friend that was in the same town, which I was raised in a little town called Mulberry, Kansas. It's right on the Kansas-Missouri line outside of Pittsburgh. And a buddy of mine, he and I had some dogs together, and he was going to quit hunting for a while, so I bought some of the dogs, and he sold some. And a few years later, he bought X Junior as a young dog back. And he went to hunting him, and he called me one time and said he was going to have to go to work. So he wanted me to come down and see him. So I went down and hunted with him a few times, and was impressed with him. And I ended up just working out a price and ended up buying him eventually. And we hunted him for a little bit. Eldon hadn't been hunting him for a while when we bought him. And so he was a little bit rusty, and we got to hunting him good and hard. He made the right kind, and we started putting him in some hunts, finished him to grand. I think he was a night champion when I bought him from Eldon. And I don't show dogs much. I have in the past, back when I was a lot younger. But he needed one win to grand him on the bench, so I actually took him to a world qualifying hunt. And I got there in time to enter him in the bench show, and I won the bench show with him and finished him to grand show. And then we started putting him in the hunts and granding him out. And then, of course, in 2001, we won the UKC World Championship with him.
Can you tell us about that win, what it meant to win that, and a little bit about that cast that was out there when you went out there, and kind of how he operated and things like that?
Yeah, in that World Championship cast, the hunt was in Palmyra, Missouri, and a well-known guy that guided the cast for us up there. We end up hunting on the Illinois side in this final cast, and we turned the dogs loose, and one of the dogs opened and didn't do anything with it. And ended up, we felt like he opened on a possum, because we found the possum dead in a cut cornfield right about where he had started barking. But the first time X opened, he was a half mile deeper, and so that gives me a second strike, and he gets in there about another mile and gets treat on a coon, and we had to walk to him, and he had the coon, and we come back. I've never had this done in a cast. I know the rules say this in UKC, but we came back, and the dog had been struck in for 100, hadn't been with the dogs, and had been over an hour. He hadn't been with any of the dogs. He's operating by himself, and when we end up going back where we last heard him, even though he was barking, they made me turn loose again, or the rest of the cast turn loose again. And when I struck, the judge put me in for 100, and I asked him why, and he said, well, it's been an hour, and the other dog hadn't worked with the other dog, so he didn't feel like he was part of the cast. That's the only cast I've ever been in my life that they done that in, but I do know that was a rule. But of course, when you got 200 on a coon, you don't want to be struck in for 100, and you make a bad tree, and then you're back to zero. In UKC, you have to have plus points to be the actual world champion. And so he goes on in trees, and we can't find a coon, but it's a big oak tree, and pretty much the hunt's over about that time.
Okay, and so you ended up winning with 225? 200,
yeah.
200 plus. Mm-hmm. Okay, so
we done a lot of walking with him on the lead, Mm-hmm. So anyway.
From the time you started coon hunting to present day, what have you seen change in the dogs, or have you seen anything change in the dogs, and what have you seen change in the sport itself?
Well, there's a lot of things that's changed. When I first started hunting, they had 3-hour hunts. And, of course, now that I'm getting older, I'm sure glad they don't have them now. But I was actually mad when they switched from 3 hours to 2 hours. And I just felt like, that didn't give a coon dog a chance. And the longer you hunt a dog, the better dogs should come out on top the longer you hunt. And I always felt like the 3-hour hunts was a good way to go. So since I started hunting, they changed it from 3 to 2, and then now they're going to hour-and-a-half casts, a lot of them, and an hour cast too, which I'm in favor of now. But been a lot of changes in the dogs. When I first started, you really, when you started hunting in a hunts, the dogs we had back then, they wanted to trail. They very seldom, I'm not saying they very seldom treed. They did tree, but if dog treed and you was in a night hunt, you just about better wait till your buddy's dog trees with that dog back then. And now we don't have to worry about that. Now we went the other way. Some of the dogs tree a little too much, but they stay treed. So that's the main difference I've seen in the dogs, from dogs that want to run all night to dogs that tree.
This comes up from time to time where people say, back in the day the dogs were better, today the dogs are better. Is there really a difference, or is there just a difference in the way they operate, do you think?
Well, my opinion is the guys that say the dogs aren't as good today, they're living in the past. You always people say, oh, so-and-so, well, that dog's dead and gone. You can say what you want to about him now, but I think the dogs are better by far now than they were back in those days.
Yeah, they always say the deader the dog, the better he was, for
Right,
sure. So
exactly.
I've heard people say that, and I don't know. I tend to disagree. I think as time has moved forward, we went from dogs not treeing enough to dogs slick treeing and treeing too much to I think we've kind of almost hit a balance now.
Yeah, I think so.
Moving forward, what kind of dogs are you still messing with dogs, and what you got out there that you're hunting, and what kind of hunts are you hunting in?
Well, I've really enjoyed hunting PKC too. Also, I've always hunted UKC hunts, and I was hunting in a lot of the PKC hunts too, and I just enjoy both of the clubs. And you hear guys say that one's better than the other, but I feel like you get about the same breaks with both of them, and it takes the same dog to win in UKC as it does in PKC.
Yeah, it takes a dog that actually trees raccoons.
Right,
To
exactly.
win.
If they treat coons, they're going to win in either one.
Yeah, I mean, I know I hear guys talk about, well, in PKC you can win and not have plus points, and you know, this, that, and the other about this other registry. In the end, if you have a dog that trees raccoons, you're going to win. Period.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's just the way it is. So, what dogs do you have now that you're hunting?
I've got a dog. He's a double X Junior bred and double Jane. I call this dog Timber Axe, and he is out of a dog I had called Timber X.
Okay, won't you tell us a little bit about those dogs there that was between Junior and where you're at now?
Well, how we come up with these dogs now that we've got is we end up buying Insane Jane when she won the World Hunt in 2005. And we had a dog in that final cast, and she put on a pretty good show. And from that we end up breeding her to X Junior, which was the first time that anybody's ever bred two world champions together back at that time. And they were all grand too. And we sold them pups for, at that time, probably was a record price for pups back then. We made two different crosses, and the dog I'm hunting now, I call him Timber Axe, and he was out of a son of that, a cross out of X Junior and Jane that I called Tall Timber Little X. This Axe dog is double bred X Junior. We took a niece, bred her back to her uncle to get this cross that Axe is out of.
Okay, so you've been around this dog breeding thing for a little while now, and talk about breeding them tight, outcrossing. Talk about just the breeding program in general. If somebody's out there that they're getting started in the coon hunting, or maybe they've been into it for a little while, but maybe they've just been buying dogs and they think, okay, it's time that I got this dog, I like it, and I want to start breeding and kind of getting my own line here.
Well, I just feel like, when a guy starts breeding a dog, that he should have the right traits to actually be able to reproduce those traits. And you don't know until you breed them to see if they will reproduce them. But years ago, I know a lot of people didn't believe in line breeding, but I think that's the way to really make your strain tight and keep the same traits that you already have and want.
Yeah, I hear people talk about line breeding and then inbreeding when they get so close, and then also outcrossing to pick up characteristics from time to time. Is that kind of what you look for when you're doing? You have dogs that have certain characteristics you like, and then maybe you see this other female or male that has some other characteristics you like. Would you outcross to those to get it into what you have currently?
Yeah, somewhat. I always feel like you breed a female to a male that complements your female, or vice versa. If you got one that trees too much, you dang sure don't want to breed it back to one that trees too much also. So you want to go with something that's more of a trailing type if you got one that's more of a tree type. But I also feel like, once you get the dogs that you want, that you need to kind of line breed that, and I like line breeding. For instance, we took Timber X, which is the daddy of this Axe dog I was telling you about, out of X Junior and Jane. And I had a female, I called her a little bit extra, which Timber X was a Grand Knight and a PKC champion also. And this extra female was a litter mate to him, and she was a Grand Knight and also a PKC champion. I'd hunted her a little bit in hunts, should have hunted her more. She's just a good, solid dog. But they really had the traits. They matched up good. So I thought I always wanted to do this one time with the right kind of dogs, and their characteristics seemed like that should make the right dog if we could breed them together. So I bred that litter mate female to her litter mate brother, and she had 4 pups that lived, and all 4 of them made nice dogs. We've got a female that's a Grand Night out of that cross right now that we've bred a few times, and we're using that to stay back in our line. And when I first bred them like that, I thought it was probably just a cross that would keep the traits good, and didn't know how good they would be. But that whole litter all 4 of them dogs made good dogs, which there's only 2 of them still alive now. We had a real nice male that coon drowned, and then we had a really, really special female out of that cross that got ran over.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you touched on that. I mean, people ask all the time. You see on Facebook asking about breeding this way or that way or whatever, and everybody I talk to, I try to ask questions, and people have different opinions on things, but for the most part, I get the same thing. If this dog has the characteristics you like, and that dog has the characteristics you like, then that would be what you wanted to breed to. So I wanted to touch on that briefly there, just to get your thoughts on it, because I know you've been doing it a while, and you've obviously been successful at it for sure. Hey guys, this is Jason over at the Coonhound Collective podcast. I'm here today to tell you about one of our sponsors, Conky's Outdoors. Whether you need a few dog collars or the whole setup, they can fix you up. They have a wide range of products from hound hunting to fishing. My friends over at Conky's Outdoors can help you out. You can order online at conkysoutdoors.com. Call them at 904-692-1568, 904-692-1568, or if you're in the Hastings, Florida area, go by and see them. Again, that's at conkysoutdoors.com, because we support people who support our way of life. Why don't you tell us some stories about Nailor and X Junior, some of these dogs that you had, some hunting stories, and just whatever you would like to share about them.
Well, I guess I'll start with Nailor. When he was 11 months old, I said, told you that the first time he ever treed was by himself. And, back then there wasn't a lot of tree dogs like he was. And I would say the first time he ever treed, when he was 10, 11 months old, when he treed off by himself, he would have probably treed for 3-4 hours. He was just that kind of a tree dog. I mean, when he treed, he stayed, and I think that was natural from the time he was born.
I know they can't see what I'm showing you, but this picture's all over Facebook. It's a picture of you and Nailor. Can you tell us about that picture, where it was taken, and does it jog any memories there for you?
Yeah, that picture was taken in Cesar, Illinois, at a PKC hunt, and I had Nailor with me, and Terry Walker actually took that picture from American Cooner, and if I would have known it was been all over the book, I'd have had him standing a little better.
Well, I tell you, that picture there is, when you say Jess Dikerson and Nailor, that's the picture that I think comes to everybody's mind. I've seen that for as long as I can remember, and now that Facebook's a thing, I see it around there for sure. Well, go ahead and tell us some more about Nailor, and then we'll talk about X Junior and some of these other dogs.
Okay, well, I touched a little bit on hunted Nailor from time he was probably 10 months old till he was about 30 months old when he got hit by that car. And a good friend of mine now is gone. Stan Hinkle was his name, and he hunted with Nailor probably as much as him and Eldon Prettyman hunted with Nailor probably as much as anybody did besides me. But Stan was with me the night he got hit by the car, and I was trying to flag the car down. Actually, we were trying to catch Nailor and a littermate brother to Nailor. We called him Dinger, and he was a Grand Night also and a PKC champion also too. Him and Nailor was running a coon, and we could see the headlights of a car way down the road coming toward us. So we drove up there as close as we could get to him, got out of the car, and of course we drove right up on Dinger and caught him. And I could see Nailor was trying to go around us to get on the other side. The coon had crossed the road, and he was trying to get around us, not let us catch him. And I could see him in the headlights of the car down the road about 50 yards. And and I was right there on top of it when the guy hit him, and glad the guy didn't stop because I was not real happy.
Yeah, I can only imagine having a dog that's that special getting hit at that young of an age for sure. So, What was that recovery process like?
Well, he had broke a bone in his hip and one in his leg, and it took about 5 6 months before he was really back where we could really hunt him good. Was told not to hunt him for a while, make sure it healed up good, so we was trying to do that. But I actually hunted him probably before and prolonged it. It didn't really let him heal good enough, when you got one that you really want to hunt. So it took us about 6 to 8 months before we got him healed up, and by then people was breeding pretty heavy. I never really got him back out and hunted him hard. We didn't really get a chance to hunt him any good big hunts.
So, you said you were breeding 100 females a year with him? Is that what you said? Somewhere around that?
He was breeding probably from as soon as we got him healed. As soon as we got him healed back up, he was already starting to breed females. We was breeding probably 125 to 150 females every year to him. And one year, I think we bred 183 that I had stud slips, PKC stud slips on.
Okay. So, as he got older, and you're breeding these females, obviously you can't haul him to hunts if he's breeding that kind of females. Was you hunting him in local hunts around the house, or you just pleasure hunting him when you had time, or what was you doing there?
Well, I did hunt him just a little bit just to keep him in shape good and stuff, but mostly we wasn't hunting him hardly any after we started, after he was about 3 years old. And after that car wreck, we didn't hunt him much after that.
I just think it's impressive that a dog that was that young, that really wasn't pushed in big hunts, per se, breeding that many females, that has, I mean, that's just a name if you know anything about walkers, that's just a name is Nocturnal Nailor. And I just think that's pretty impressive that, no older than he was when he got hit by the car, and, what he had accomplished at that time, especially back then. So tell us about some of this other breeding coming past Nailor and some of the other stud dogs that you've had.
Well, first I'll go ahead and touch on why I think that people come to Nailor. Like you said, we didn't win any world championships with him to make people come, to have people come like they do to some of the dogs that breed. But about that time, I think people had bred the dogs at one hunts, and a lot of the dogs, not saying anything bad about dogs, but some of the dogs that really are good hunting dogs don't make them good reproducing dogs. But what I think brought people to Nailor is his looks and his mouth and just the overall makeup that he had, and of course his pedigree.
So talk about his mouth. I seen Lipper was in his background, and Tar Rattler, and I've hunted with some Tar Rattler dogs, and they got a pretty decent mouth on them, but just how loud was he?
Well, Nailor was the loudest tree dog I ever heard in my life. I mean, I've hunted with a lot of dogs, and he was the loudest tree dog. When he treed and you got to the tree, he didn't even look. You didn't even know. He didn't know you was at the tree. He would look straight up the tree. You could put a lead on him. He even didn't even acknowledge you were there. And you literally had to drag him off the tree if you didn't shoot a coon down. But he would so loud we'd tie him back because he would hurt your eardrums at the tree if you just tried to shine for a coon for a little bit.
Yeah, I know a lot of those Lipper dogs, they say, were loud, and I had heard that about Nailor, about him being so loud he'd hurt your ears, when you're around him at a tree, for sure. What besides the ones we've covered, or even the ones we covered, what other stud dogs have you had, and how having a stud dog, how's it affected you as a coon hunter?
Well, back when I had Nailor, I was really into the hunts hard and heavy, and we were going about every weekend somewhere, and we'd been North Carolina, South Carolina, maybe Georgia or Michigan, somewhere about every weekend we were going to something good, something big. I've done some stupid stuff out there coon hunting, I've crawled in places where snakes den up underwater and did crazy things. I've climbed trees across the river when it was frozen, but not frozen enough to maybe hold you. And I've crossed on trees and got a hold of another tree on the other side of the river and crawled over there, got over there and got my dog, and then would actually carry the dog back across the river in the tree with me going back. I've done some pretty stupid things, really, when you come down to it.
Okay, well, let's talk about those stories. I think that's an important part of coon hunting. I think we all have a few little stories, here and there, but you probably got quite a few that you can tell, so let's touch on them.
Well, there's sometimes we were hunting at a hunt one night it was in Texas at one of Reggie Ramsey's PKC hunts that he was having there at Whitesboro, Texas. And I was actually hunting X Junior, and this was after we had won the world championship with him. And I was hunting him in a cast, and these other boys' dogs all treed and didn't have a coon, and X Junior went on, and he had a coon. And so them guys had all minus, and I had 200 plus. And the next track we turned loose, X Junior and another dog they're all treed, but we knew they were in a hole when they was on the edge of a lake, and you could see that where the dogs went in. X Junior and another guy's dog was back up in this hole, but you could just see about 2 inches of daylight in there where you could see where they was at. And so I actually had to go underwater and swim back in under that. It was kind of a cave back in there. And so the dogs, they had a coon face to face with a coon, and I had to go underwater again and swim to get them. But they was about 4 foot from me, and I started looking around. I was laying on a mound of like a beaver den inside this cave like deal, and I get to looking around. There's sticks and stuff there, so I start looking around, and there's about 100 holes, about 1.5 inches around. I was laying right on top of a snake's den, and so I was already there. So I'm thinking I'm getting my dog. I'm not going to take a scratch. So I get a stick, and it had a hook on it, and I hooked his collar, and had another stick and slapped him and got his attention a little bit and yanked him with that stick in his collar, and I got him to me. I stayed in there about another 15 minutes trying to get the other guy's dog out. So that was one of the things that wasn't real smart of me doing.
Yeah, I'm not a snake person at all. That would have been a deterrent for me.
I got another one even about falling in a well.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's hear about it.
Well, Jason, you was asking me about some other stories that I've got about hunting and dogs. When I was about 18, one night we had a couple of dogs treed, and we go to them. And back way when we were kids, everybody wanted to shake a coon out. So one of the boys said, "Let's shake one of them coons out." We shook it out, and the dogs were running. 2 dogs. I had 2 dogs, and they went quiet. And I thought they was way off. You could faintly hear them, so we would go back to the truck and drive around, and it sounded like they were back where we came from. So we went back there and started walking, and we could faintly hear them, so we walked up on them, and they had both fell in a well. And there was about 20 foot down in this well, and there was water down there. And there was about 4 of us hunting, and we all had a dog lead with us. So I crawled down this well. Some of them wells are those hand dug lined with rock, and there wasn't very big around, so you could put your back up against them and just kind of inch down in the well. Well, I get down there, and my good dog was dead. She had drowned in that well, and this other dog, he was on the only ledge that they was there, and he wasn't very good, but he was alive. But I get down there, and there's 3 snakes swimming around with us in that well. So I tightened their collars up, and we put our leads together, and they lowered their leads down to me, and I snapped the dogs up. We pulled them up out of that deal. But that's another thing a guy probably shouldn't be doing, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I could handle the whale. The snake is no.
Yeah, there was 3 snakes swimming around with me.
I would be done at the snakes. I just don't know how.
Well, I didn't get in the water with them, but I'm here to you from them, and they're swimming around. That dog's just dead, and that one dog was dead and just floating there. And so I put a lead on her, and we drug her to the top and got the other dog out too.
Wow. Is there anything else you want to cover dog wise before we get to the end here?
Well, you asked me, Jason, about some other the stud dogs I had. I had Skipper, and he was a nice dog. I told you how loud Nailor was. Skipper was loud. He wasn't as loud a tree dog as Nailor was, but he was loud. And Skipper probably had the best track mouth of any dog I've ever heard in my life, including Nailor. Nailor had a good track mouth too, but it wasn't like Skipper's. I'd just soon hear him run a coon as any dog I've ever heard. He was a pretty impressive dog.
Okay.
Well, another interesting thing I done, and I'll tell you this. When you talk about doing stupid things at night, there's a lot of times a guy don't use good judgment. And I had a dog at one time climbed a tree, and he was right on the edge of a cliff. And he was probably 50 foot up in this tree, and this cliff was probably 50 foot on down, and he was out over a limb. He crawled out over on a dead limb and couldn't go any farther. And this is the thunder dog I had, the one I told you guys at first that one of my first grand nights that I had, and the first dog I kind of pushed. And I climbed up that tree. Of course, I only had a dog lead, but I made a noose out of it, and I got up above the dog and on a good limb. He was on a dead limb, and me and him both couldn't have fit out on that thing or it would have broke. But I made a noose and swung it over his neck or his head and caught him by the neck and pulled him up to me and then climbed down the tree with him. And us coon hunters do a lot of stupid things to save a dog, and that was probably not the smartest thing to do.
Yeah, well, sometimes dog hunters get a bad name from anti-hunters, but I don't think they realize the relationship that a hunter in the woods builds with that animal that they're hunting every night, that they have in their kennel, that they're caring for every day. I just don't think people understand the bond that is created there and the lengths that someone will go to, like some of these stories you've told us here today, to try to save their dog. I mean, you're putting your life in a jeopardizing situation to save that animal. And I just think that's something that, needs to be told, that needs to be relayed to some of these people that don't hunt, that don't understand. This is not Fluffy sitting on the couch with us. This is a athlete, a working dog out there that you have a connection and a bond with, that is doing what it loves to do, and you're doing everything you can to keep that dog safe and protected. Well, we have been at it almost an hour, not quite an hour now. I really appreciate you taking your time out of your day to stop by and do this with me in person. It's been an honor to meet you, and I really do appreciate it. And is there anybody you'd like to thank or say before we sign off here?
No, I mean, there's been a lot of people that's helped me through with the dogs. I've had guys that help hunt them for me, and I had a great partner in Russ Meyer for years. That he and I went down a lot of roads together, going to these hunts. And Rusty Jones was one of the first youth guys that he and I used to go every weekend somewhere. And from the time he was 14 till he turned 18, we would be at a hunt about every weekend too. So I appreciate Rusty and his family, because they would always have to meet us and on the road going through toward his house. I was always having to go east, and they was kind of on our way, and they'd meet us to and from. And then in later years, after Rusty got out and started going to college and going to school, another young guy, Cody Myrtle, was a good dog man too, and he started going with me when he was about 14 till he was 18, hunting the youth hunts too. So I enjoyed having those guys along, and they really helped me a lot.
Yeah, I'd say with that kind of stud dogs and people showing up, it takes other people to help you get everything done for sure. So I know with me it's just my kids, but just a few dogs that I have, it takes extra help feeding dogs and making sure they're took care of if I'm not there or whatever. So I do know that. But hey, I appreciate you taking your time to be on here today, and hopefully we can get back together and we can cover some more stories and some more history of this, and especially if you're going to be down this way, I think that'd be awesome, and I think it'd be really good for the sport also. So I appreciate you being on here.
Thank you too, Jason.
Alrighty. Thank you guys for listening today to the Coonhound Collective podcast, and we will catch you next time. Thanks, guys, for listening to the Coonhound Collective podcast today. We really appreciate you taking your time out of your day to listen to the podcast. If you don't mind, head over to Facebook and give us a like, and head over to Instagram and give us a follow. It's both at the Coonhound Collective. Also, if you would like to reach us here at the Coonhound Collective, you can reach us at thecoonhoundcollective@gmail.com. If there's someone that you would like to hear on the podcast or a product that you would like to hear talked about, please send it to thecoonhoundcollective@gmail.com. Thanks again. Have a great day.